You ever had that one friend? The one who knew you better than you knew yourself. The one who finished your sentences, remembered your embarrassing childhood stories, and saw through your bravest smiles. For me, that was Jess. She wasn't just my best friend. She was my sister, my confidant, my human diary. We'd known each other since kindergarten, two awkward kids bonding over shared crayons and a mutual love for telling elaborate tall tales. Our lives were so intertwined. People often joked we shared a brain. We grew up side by side, navigating the choppy waters of adolescence together. First crushes, bad haircuts, family dramas. Jess was always there. She was the one I called when my heart was broken, the one who'd show up with ice cream in bad movies. And I was the same for her. Her triumphs were my triumphs, her sorrows, my own. We even chose the same university, sharing a tiny dorm room that quickly became a chaotic haven of late-night study sessions and even later night heart-to-hearts. After college, life took us on slightly different paths, but our bond remained unbreakable. I landed a stable, if a bit dull, job in marketing, slowly building my career. I was meticulous, organized, perhaps a little too trusting, always seeing the best in people. I valued stability, routine, and especially loyalty. Jess, on the other hand, was a free spirit. She jumped from one creative endeavor to another, a whirlwind of ideas and unfinished projects. She was charming, persuasive, always had a story, and always seemed to land on her feet, even after her riskiest ventures. I admired her zest for life, her courage to chase fleeting passions. I often thought she had the adventurous spirit I lacked, and she always said I was her anchor, the one who kept her grounded. I never questioned our friendship. Why would I? She was family, more than family, in some ways, because we chose each other. I trusted her implicitly, probably more than anyone else in my life. She knew all my financial details, where I banked, my savings goals, even my credit card numbers for those times she'd borrow my card for an emergency pizza run. My passwords? Oh, she knew them all. It was a running joke. We had a shared document for important contacts, utilities, even my recurring bill payment dates. Just in case, she'd always say with a wink, "You get abducted by aliens and I need to water your plants." It felt safe, comfortable. It felt like absolute security. I was working hard, saving up for a down payment on a small apartment, my first real step towards complete independence. It was a long-term goal, something I was meticulously planning. Jess was my biggest cheerleader. "You go, girl," she'd say. "You're gonna have the cutest little place. And I'll be your first guest, obviously." We even spent weekends browse furniture stores, planning the layout of this hypothetical future apartment. Her excitement felt genuine, a shared dream. My life was pretty open. I didn't have many secrets from Jess. In fact, I had no secrets from her. She had a key to my apartment, of course. She'd often come over when I was at work, sometimes just to hang out, sometimes to grab something she'd left behind. Just making myself at home. She'd text, usually with a silly emoji, and I loved it. It meant I wasn't truly alone. It meant I had someone who felt so comfortable in my space, in my life, that boundaries barely existed. Looking back, there were tiny ripples in the water, subtle shifts I dismissed, like when she suddenly became very interested in my work bonus, asking precise questions about when it would hit my account, or when she'd casually ask for my birth date, just checking if I got it right for your digital calendar. Harmless, right? Jess was just being Jess, detail-oriented in her own quirky way. Or so I told myself. My brain simply didn't compute that the person I loved, the person I shared my most vulnerable self with, could possibly be plotting against me. My trust was a fortress, built not with walls, but with naive belief in her unwavering loyalty. I was even planning a big surprise for her. Her birthday was coming up, and I was secretly booking us a weekend getaway to a small cabin in the mountains, a place she'd always dreamed of visiting. I wanted to give back, to show her how much her friendship meant to me. The irony of it all, planning this gesture of pure love while she, unbeknownst to me, was meticulously dismantling my life brick by brick, still stings. My identity, my financial stability, my very reputation, these weren't just abstract concepts. They were the culmination of years of hard work, discipline, and careful planning. They were my security blanket. And Jess, the one person I thought would guard them with her life, was about to shred them into unrecognizable pieces. She had all the access she needed. She knew all the answers. She just needed the right moment. And I, utterly blind, was about to hand it to her on a silver platter. All right, let's dive into part 2. The catalyst or the betrayal. This is where Jess's manipulation escalates into outright sabotage and identity theft, exploiting Clara's complete trust. The goal is to make the betrayal feel sudden and devastating, despite the small prior hints. We'll aim for around 6,000 characters. Life has a way of tricking you, doesn't it? One moment, you're planning mountain getaways with your best friend, feeling utterly secure. The next, the ground beneath you just disappears. I was so wrapped up in my apartment savings, so excited about Jess's birthday surprise, that I missed the early tremors. And then, the earthquake hit. It started subtly, insidiously. The first thing I noticed was a tiny ripple, my credit card. I usually paid it off in full every month, meticulously. But one statement showed a balance. A small one, a few $100s, for online purchases I didn't recognize. My heart did a little flutter, but I dismissed it. Maybe I'd forgotten something. A late-night impulse buy. Jess often borrowed it for shared expenses, concert tickets, takeout. Must be that, I told myself and paid it off. Then came the emails. Not to me, but from me. Replies to job applications I hadn't sent. Enthusiastic follow-ups to interviews I'd never had. They were professional, well-written, but the jobs were odd, outside my field, for companies I'd never heard of. My first thought was a glitch, a spam attack. I changed my email password, just to be safe. Jess, when I mentioned it to her casually, just shrugged. The internet's a wild place, Clara. Bots are everywhere. Her lack of concern felt normal, reassuring even. The real shift began when my bank called. Miss my last name, we're calling to confirm a large transfer initiated from your savings account. My blood ran cold. A transfer? What transfer? They rattled off an amount, a significant chunk of my apartment down payment sent to an unfamiliar offshore account. My voice shook as I denied it, explaining I hadn't authorized anything. But the request came from your verified email, the bank representative insisted, and the security questions were answered correctly. That's when the pieces started clicking into place, horrifyingly. My email password, the one I'd just changed, had been the old one. The one Jess knew. The security questions? Our shared inside jokes. My birth date. My mother's maiden name. Things only Jess would know, or could easily access from our shared childhood memories and documents. I called Jess immediately, my hands trembling. Jess, did you get a notification about a bank transfer from my account? I just got a call, and they said a huge amount went out. And I don't know anything about it. I tried to keep my voice steady, but it was cracking. There was a pause on the other end too long. Then her voice, sugary sweet, almost dismissive. Oh, Clara, that sounds super stressful. No, nothing on my end. Maybe you got hacked. These things happen, you know. I told you the internet was wild. She sounded too calm, too collected. The next few days were a blur of panic and disbelief. The bank flagged the transaction, but told me it would take weeks, maybe months, to investigate. The money was effectively gone. And then, the true scale of the betrayal began to unfurl. My credit score plummeted. Loans I hadn't taken out started appearing on my reports. Small then larger amounts. All in my name. Then came the legal notices. My apartment building sent me a letter about unpaid rent, though I'd always paid on time. Turns out, my automatic payments had been diverted. My car registration was supposedly overdue, with new fines accruing. My health insurance was suddenly cancelled. It felt like my entire life was being systematically dismantled, brick by brick, by an invisible force. I was falling apart. Sleeping became impossible. Eating was out of the question. I'd pace my apartment, the one I might soon lose, trying to piece together how this nightmare had happened. Every conversation I'd ever had with Jess, every shared password, every time I'd handed her my card for a quick errand, it all replayed in my mind like a horror movie. She had been collecting pieces of my life, meticulously, patiently, for months, maybe even years. The true blow, however, wasn't just financial. It was the absolute, soul-crushing realization that the person I trusted with every vulnerable part of myself had weaponized that trust. She wasn't just stealing my money. She was stealing my identity, my future, my very sense of security. And she was doing it with the ease of someone performing a routine chore. I found evidence of a new social media profile, created in my name, with photos of me, but posting opinions that were completely against everything I stood for. Inflammatory, hateful comments, arguments with strangers online, all under my digital face. My reputation was being shredded piece by piece, while I watched helplessly. My old friends started sending concerned messages, asking if I was okay, referencing strange posts they'd seen. The insidious nature of it all. She wasn't just taking my money, she was taking my good name too. I tried to confront Jess one more time, desperation clawing at my throat. I showed her one of the fake social media posts. Jess, this is insane. Someone is using my identity. This is serious. She looked at the screen, her face completely blank, then she actually smiled. A slow, chilling smile that didn't reach her eyes. Wow, Clara, she said, her voice dripping with mock sympathy. That's rough. Are you sure you're just not stressed? Maybe you did post something like this and forgot? Happens, you know. That smile, that cold, calculated indifference. That was the moment, the final brutal confirmation. It wasn't a hacker. It wasn't a mistake. It was Jess, my best friend, the person who swore she'd always have my back. She was enjoying this. She was relishing my pain. And in that moment, the love I'd felt for her, the trust, the shared history, it all calcified into a block of ice in my chest. The betrayal was complete, and I was utterly, terribly alone. The polite click of Jess's smile, that awful, vacant look in her eyes, it was like a switch flipped inside me. The fog of denial lifted, and I saw everything with terrifying clarity. It wasn't an accident. It wasn't a mistake. It was a calculated, deliberate act. By my best friend, the person who swore she'd always protect me. My carefully built life, that stable, predictable house I'd been so proud of, wasn't just crumbling. It was actively being demolished, beam by beam. The bank calls intensified, turning into angry demands. Letters from collection agencies piled up, each one a fresh stab of panic. My landlord called, confused, then furious about the missing rent payments. Miss my last name. If this isn't resolved, we'll have to take action. Action. Eviction. Losing my apartment. The thought alone made my stomach churn. I was living in a constant state of low-grade terror. Every phone ring sent a jolt of anxiety through me. Every email notification felt like another piece of bad news. My credit score, once pristine, was now a disaster zone. I couldn't even apply for a new credit card, let alone a loan. My dream of a down payment of that cute little apartment was a cruel, distant memory. It wasn't just gone. It had been actively stolen, used to fund Jess's unknown agenda. But the financial ruin, as devastating as it was, paled in comparison to the emotional wreckage. It was the betrayal that ripped through my very core. Jess, my other half, the keeper of my secrets, the one I'd shared every milestone with, had systematically used every piece of that intimacy against me. Every shared password, every inside joke, every detail of my life, she knew they were all just tools in her arsenal. It made me question everything. Was our friendship ever real? Was every laugh, every shared tear, just part of an elaborate act? The thought was a sickening, nauseating swirl of confusion and pain. I felt utterly, completely foolish. My trusting nature, something I always considered a virtue, had been twisted into my biggest vulnerability. How could I have been so blind? So naive? The self-reproach was relentless, a cruel echo in my empty apartment. I replayed every casual conversation, every innocuous question Jess had asked, seeing them now as sinister fishing expeditions. The birthday surprise I'd been planning for her, that hopeful little dream, now felt like a bitter, mocking joke. The worst part was the isolation. Who could I talk to? How do you explain to anyone that your best friend, your chosen sister, systematically destroyed your financial life and tarnished your reputation? My friends from work, my few acquaintances, they'd seen those fake social media posts. The ones filled with opinions so unlike me, so inflammatory. They started to distance themselves. Concerned messages turned into silence. I caught people whispering, saw hesitant glances. My good name, meticulously built over years, was now being dragged through the mud by a phantom version of myself. Sleep became a luxury I couldn't afford. My nights were filled with restless tossing and turning, replaying scenarios, searching for a sign I missed, a red flag I should have seen. My days were a blur of cold coffee and desperate, futile attempts to contact banks, police, anyone who could help. But the response was always the same. It's complex. It takes time. We need more evidence. More evidence? My life was crumbling around me, and they needed more evidence. I stopped eating properly. My clothes hung loose. My reflection in the mirror showed a stranger, gaunt, hollow-eyed, a shadow of the person I used to be. The vibrant, organized Clara was gone, replaced by a shell of anxiety and despair. The joy I once felt in simple things, like a sunny morning or a good book, vanished. Everything felt tainted, overshadowed by the looming threat of financial ruin and the crushing weight of betrayal. There were moments, brief flashes, where I felt an urge to confront Jess, to scream, to demand answers. But then, I'd remember that cold, calculating smile she gave me, her complete lack of remorse. What was the point? She wouldn't feel guilt. She wouldn't apologize. She'd just deny, deflect, and probably laugh about my pain later. The thought was sickening. It shut down any impulse to engage. I was alone, truly alone. No parents to turn to, and now, my chosen family had become my tormentor. The security I had built, the stability I craved, had been an illusion, a house of cards that Jess had gleefully blown away. And I felt helpless, paralyzed by the sheer magnitude of the destruction and the chilling realization that the person who knew me best had used that intimate knowledge to utterly destroy me. I don't know exactly when the shift happened. Maybe it was the third eviction notice, taped aggressively to my door, that finally jarred me out of my stupor. Or perhaps it was when I caught my reflection in a darkened window, seeing not myself, but a hollow, defeated stranger. Jess had stolen my money, my reputation, even my peace of mind, but she wasn't going to steal me. Not completely. The despair was still a suffocating blanket, but underneath it, a tiny ember began to glow. A flicker of something cold, hard, and utterly determined. It wasn't about getting my money back anymore. Not just that. It was about something far more fundamental. My dignity. My right to exist without being haunted by the shadow of her betrayal. I had spent my life being the responsible one, the fixer, the loyal friend, and all of that had been used against me. But those very traits, my meticulousness, my patience, my stubborn refusal to give up, they weren't weaknesses. They were weapons. And Jess was about to find out. The thought of her, living her life, laughing, perhaps even bragging about how she'd pulled one over on poor Clara, was like a punch to the gut. But this time, it didn't knock me down. It fueled me. It twisted the pain into something sharper, more focused. Resolve. She thought she had won. She thought I was just another mark easily discarded. She forgot who I was before her, before our friendship became a tool for her cruelty. My mind, which had been a chaotic mess of panic and self-pity, began to clear. I remembered all those times Jess had been lucky. All those convenient windfalls that had seemed to appear out of nowhere. Her ability to talk her way out of anything. to charm anyone. It wasn't luck. It was manipulation. And I had been her biggest, most trusting victim. But I knew her better than anyone. I knew her habits, her laziness, her blind spots. She was brilliant at the con, but messy with the details. She thrived on chaos and believed her charm could cover anything. That was her weakness, and it would be my strength. The first thing I did was force myself to eat a proper meal, even if it tasted like ash in my mouth. Then, I tackled the most immediate crisis, the eviction. I called the landlord, begged for an extension, explained vaguely, without naming names, that I was a victim of identity theft. It was humiliating, but necessary. To my surprise, he was sympathetic, granting me a short reprieve. It was a tiny victory, but it was enough to show me that I wasn't completely helpless. Then, I started to organize. My cluttered apartment, a reflection of my inner turmoil, slowly began to regain order. Each file I sorted, each document I categorized, was a step towards reclaiming control. I started a new notebook, not a diary of despair, but a strategy guide. Every piece of information I had, the bank statements, the fake social media profiles, the dates of suspicious transactions, went into it. Meticulously, like assembling a puzzle. Piece by painful piece, I revisited those old social media profiles Jess had created in my name. The vile comments, the hateful arguments. I screenshot everything. It made my stomach turn, seeing my face, my name, attached to such ugliness. But I needed it. It was proof of the character assassination she'd orchestrated. I couldn't afford a high-powered lawyer, not yet. But I researched legal aid services, non-profits specializing in identity theft. I spent hours online, reading about digital forensics, data recovery, even the basics of how these scams worked. It was like I was back in college, cramming for the most important exam of my life. Only this time, the stakes were my entire future. The anger wasn't a wildfire anymore. It was a cold, steady burn. It sharpened my focus. It made me patient. Jess thought she was invisible. She thought she was untouchable. But she forgot one crucial thing. I knew her. Not just the charming facade, but the sloppy habits, the overconfidence that always led her to cut corners. She thought I'd simply disappear, a casualty of her ambition. She was wrong. I looked at my reflection in the window again, this time with a different gaze. The hollowness was still there, a scar of what she'd done, but beneath it, a steely glint had returned to my eyes. This wasn't just about survival anymore. This was about making sure Jess knew, unequivocally, that she couldn't just walk away from the wreckage she'd created. She had stolen my identity, but she hadn't stolen my spirit. And she was about to learn that some wounds, once they heal, leave behind a strength that is far more dangerous than any initial pain. The game was far from over. In fact, it was just beginning, and this time, I was playing to win. The quiet resolve that had ignited within me became a burning, steady flame. Jess thought she was clever, untouchable. She didn't realize that the person she'd targeted had spent years perfecting the art of organization, of seeing patterns, of finding the missing pieces. My administrative background, once a source of quiet frustration, now felt like my superpower. My first real step was to secure my digital life. Every account, every password changed. Not just to something new, but to complex, multi-layered codes Jess could never guess. I backed up every document, every photo, every digital shred of my existence onto encrypted drives. I created new, untraceable email addresses and burner phone numbers for my investigation. I was going dark, becoming a ghost to Jess, just as she had tried to make me. Then, I started building my evidence. Methodically, like a detective, but with a personal stake that ran deeper than any professional duty. I had the bank statements showing the unauthorized transfers. I had the collection notices for debts I didn't owe. These were the symptoms. I needed to find the disease, and more importantly, the hen that spread it. I went back to the fake social media profiles. Jess hadn't just posted random hateful comments. She'd engaged in specific online communities, forums dedicated to criticizing certain public figures, groups that promoted extreme views. It was jarring to see my face, my name, attached to such vitriol. But within these communities, Jess had built a new false persona for me. She was so confident in her anonymity that she made mistakes. Small comments, inside jokes from our past, or references to events that only we knew about, sprinkled into these public posts. Clues, digital breadcrumbs. I cross-referenced these with Jess's own known online habits. Her preferred browser, her typical posting times, even her unique turns of phrase. It was chilling to see how meticulously she had crafted this false identity, how she had woven in just enough Clara details to make it believable to outsiders, while distorting the core of who I was. My biggest break came from an unexpected source, an old cloud storage account we'd shared for photos from a college trip. Jess was notoriously bad at deleting old files. Deep within the archives, buried under thousands of vacation pictures and silly memes, I found it. A hidden folder, password protected, but using a variation of a password she'd always used, a childish inside joke. My hands trembled as I typed it in. Inside, I found a treasure trove of damning evidence. Not just screenshots of my financial details, but actual scans of my driver's license, my social security card, even my birth certificate. There were spreadsheets outlining the fake loan applications she'd submitted in my name, tracking the money she'd siphoned off. And then, the voice memos, dozens of them. Jess, talking to someone presumably an accomplice, though the voice was distorted, gloating about how easy it was. She trusts me with everything, her voice, familiar yet chillingly detached, chuckled in one recording. I practically am her. It's too perfect. She won't even know what hit her. In another, she described altering my online banking preferences, diverting statements to a different email address she controlled. She spoke of forging signatures, of impersonating me over the phone. The sheer audacity, the cold-blooded planning, made my stomach clench. It was a long-game betrayal, executed with surgical precision. I downloaded everything. Every document, every recording, every piece of evidence. I organized it, chronologically, meticulously, cross-referencing each item with the dates of the actual fraudulent activities. My new notebook filled up with names of institutions, dates, times, IP addresses, anything that could tie Jess directly to the crimes. I didn't contact her. I didn't warn her. That was her expectation, wasn't it? The emotional meltdown. The dramatic confrontation. I wasn't going to give her the satisfaction. My plan was built on silence, on stealth. I continued to appear to struggle, to be overwhelmed by the chaos in my life. I sent vague, distressed replies to mutual friends who occasionally checked in, ensuring the narrative of poor, confused Clara persisted. Jess, no doubt, fed off this, cementing her belief that I was too broken to fight back. Once I had everything, I sought legal counsel again, this time with a stack of physical and digital proof that was undeniable. The identity theft specialist I found was initially guarded, but as I laid out the meticulously organized evidence, piece by piece, his expression shifted from skepticism to shock. "Miss, my last name," he said, pushing his glasses up his nose. This is comprehensive. She left a trail, all right. A very clear one. He advised caution, explaining the complexities of criminal and civil charges. But his words instilled confidence. The police investigation had been slow, bogged down by the initial lack of clear evidence. My dossier changed everything. It put them on a fast track. Jess was still living her carefree life, occasionally posting vague, supportive messages on social media about helping friends through tough times. The hypocrisy was staggering, but I knew her time was coming. The trap was set. She thought she was still the puppet master, pulling my strings. She just didn't realize I had cut them long ago, and was now patiently, silently, weaving a net around her. The sweet, unsuspecting Clara was gone. In her place stood someone who had been forged in the fire of betrayal, and was ready to unleash a justice that was cold, precise, and utterly unavoidable. The waiting was excruciating. Every day felt like an eternity, knowing that Jess was still out there, living her carefree life, oblivious to the storm gathering around her. I continued to play the part of the struggling victim, sending texts to mutual friends about how overwhelmed I was, how complicated everything had become. I even let slip that I was considering moving back to my hometown, hoping to reinforce her belief that I was retreating, defeated. My lawyer, however, was moving fast. With the mountain of evidence I'd provided, the police investigation gained momentum. It was no longer a vague case of identity theft. It was a clear-cut pattern of fraud and deliberate sabotage, with a prime suspect. Warrants were issued, not just for Jess, but for her digital devices. The moment came on a Tuesday morning. I was at work, trying to focus on a spreadsheet, when my phone buzzed with a news alert. It wasn't about me, not directly. It was a local news report. The headline flashed across my screen: "Prominent local artist arrested for identity theft, fraud." Below it, a mugshot. Jess, her face, usually so vibrant and expressive, was pale and drawn, a mask of shock and disbelief. My breath hitched. My heart, which had been a drum of anxiety for months, suddenly felt light, almost buoyant. It wasn't a triumphant roar, but a quiet, profound sigh of relief. Justice. My silent plan had worked. The news spread like wildfire through our old circles. Friends, acquaintances, even former colleagues, were stunned. The report detailed the depth of her schemes, the intricate web of deceit, the numerous victims, myself included, though my identity wasn't explicitly named. They mentioned the systematic financial ruin, the fake online profiles, the calculated betrayal of trust. The narrative that Jess had so carefully crafted, of the charming artist, the supportive friend, shattered into a million pieces. I didn't reach out to anyone. I didn't need to. My phone was inundated with messages, not accusatory ones, but apologies. "Clara, I am so sorry. I can't believe it was Jess. We had no idea. We saw those posts. We worried, but we never imagined." The collective realization of her true nature was a quiet victory in itself. My reputation, once tarnished by her lies, began to slowly, painstakingly, repair itself. The truth, ugly as it was finally out. Jess's trial was swift, almost anticlimactic. The evidence was overwhelming. The bank statements, the forged documents, the recordings of her own voice gloating about her schemes. There was no denying her guilt. Her lawyers tried to paint her as misguided, as struggling with her own demons, but the sheer coldness of her actions, laid bare in court, was undeniable. She was convicted on multiple counts of identity theft and fraud. The sentence was significant: years in prison, with orders for full restitution to her victims. I didn't attend the sentencing. I didn't need to see her face one last time. My revenge wasn't about watching her suffer. It was about her facing accountability. It was about her losing the freedom she had so casually stolen from me. It was about her perfect, charming facade being ripped away for the world to see. And that was enough. More than enough. With Jess behind bars, life slowly, almost imperceptibly, began to stabilize. The constant anxiety that had been my shadow for months started to lift. The fear of another false charge, another credit alert, another devastating phone call finally dissipated. I worked tirelessly to clear my name with banks and credit bureaus. A tedious process, but one I tackled with newfound resilience. It was like weeding a garden after a long, hard winter, clearing away the debris to make way for new growth. I got my apartment back, negotiated new payment plans, and slowly, dollar by dollar, started rebuilding my savings. It was a long road, but this time, every step forward felt like a true victory. I was no longer driven by desperation, but by a quiet strength. The most profound change wasn't external. It was internal. The naive, overly trusting Clara was gone. In her place was a woman who was still kind, still empathetic, but now armed with a sharp discernment. I learned to listen not just to words, but to the silences, to the subtle shifts in people's eyes. I learned that trust isn't given freely. It's earned slowly, deliberately. My friendships became deeper, more meaningful. I cultivated relationships built on genuine vulnerability and mutual respect, not blind faith. I even found myself cautiously opening up to new experiences, new connections, but with a wisdom forged in fire. Years later, I heard Jess was trying to appeal her sentence, or that she was struggling in prison, blaming everyone but herself. It didn't affect me anymore. Her fate was her own. My life, however, was mine again. I still have a picture on my desk. It's an old one, from our college dorm room, me and Jess, laughing, arms around each other. Sometimes I look at it, not with anger, but with a quiet sense of reflection. It's a reminder of how close I came to losing everything, and how much stronger I became by refusing to be a victim. Jess thought she could erase me, but instead, she inadvertently helped me become the strongest version of myself. And that, in the end, was the truest form of justice. My life, rebuilt from the ashes, was my ultimate victory.